Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this FIDIC webinar. Today we are looking at integrity in infrastructure delivery during time of corruption and conflict. And this is a webinar organized by, Integrity Management Company. So I'm delighted to welcome you all to this particular gathering. My name is Dr. Nelson Ogunshaki. I'm the CEO of FIDIC. For those who are new, to this session, we try to have this gathering within 1 hour, 30 minutes, recognizing the challenges where people are in different world. The topic is very, very important to FIDIC in the sense that we talk about quality, sustainability, and integrity. This is the latter part of that particular quality, sustainability, and integrity. This is very important to FIDIC and to consulting industry. So I'm delighted that we are discussing this and that we have a fantastic panel who's going to help us to open up the debate. So before I sort of move forward, next slide, please. I would like to sort of, just bring everybody up to date. This webinar is organized by Integrity Management Committee, like any other. Last week we have another one, and next week there will be another one coming through. But the one coming up next week is to do with essential requirement for managing contractual risk. Thereafter, we have State of the World report, which is coming up 23rd of June on transport. And then we have in May, what I call Contract Users Conference, which is starting on the 11th to 20th of May. Opportunity for you to be involved with this, please visit our website. Next slide, please. It is my delight now to introduce the FIDIC President, Tony Barry from Australia, to share a few words on the significance of this particular subject today. So Tony, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson, and welcome everybody to this webinar. As Nelson's already indicated, this is a very important subject to FIDIC, and I'd like to extend my thanks to the Integrity Management Committee and our speakers this evening for putting on this webinar. I hope you benefit from it, and I hope it changes your perspective or encourages you to continue a very healthy perspective on this matter. FIDIC has 10 objectives which are enshrined in our statutes, and one of those, which is very relevant for tonight's discussion, is to combat and condemn bribery and corruption and promote ethics, integrity and transparency in our industry. This is a very important objective, and this webinar, in fact, is giving some life to that objective, and certainly the work that has been done by the Integrity Management Committee over many, many years has contributed greatly to this battle. In 2019, it was estimated that about $3.6 trillion was extracted annually through bribery and corruption. And that is a massive amount of money, however you look at it, and it deprives so many people in this world of the opportunity to have a high quality hospital, a wonderful school. Many, many other elements of infrastructure are lost because of the ability of individuals to extract corrupt payments out of the system. It jeopardizes and harms our ability to achieve the UN SDGs. It is that significant. Quality is compromised, bad decisions are made in both planning, procurement, construction, resources are wasted, misallocation of funds occurs, negative consequences everywhere through our industry from this sort of conduct, and the poorer people in our world are deprived of so many opportunities. So what does that mean for consulting engineers? Two things I think I would encourage at a firm and an individual level. Right across our industry, we need to ensure that effective governance is in place to ensure that our values, our policies, our preferred behaviours are clearly defined and communicated to everybody. We need to make strategic choices and decisions and have processes made or put in place that are both transparent and honest. We need to make sure our governance is effective and our boards and management have the skills and the courage and commitment to build a culture focused on integrity. We need to put in place some of the systems FIDIC's been talking about for many years to make sure we drive and enforce integrity compliance. That's on the corporate level. On an individual level, we need leaders with the self-awareness and courage to behave and act and demonstrate our preferred values and behaviours. We need leadership which clearly communicates integrity policy and practice to our shareholders, our stakeholders, our partners, our clients, and our staff. And we need a culture built on appreciation for people, community, and the achievement of excellence and intolerance for corruption. To support that, FIDIC and our companies in the group and our MAs need to provide the training and development which enables people to celebrate these values and to live with integrity and their reputation intact. Leading with integrity is a subject I encourage us all to consider. And there are many elements of the comments tonight which I'm sure will help you. Please do not walk away from this challenge, because every unfortunate thing we walk past and allow to happen only encourages the conduct that we're talking about. We need to have the courage to call out these issues, to make sure that corrupt practices are stamped out, and to recognise that these practices are often complex and difficult to deal with. But we must take on the challenge. We must know that corruption is very serious, and it's a very serious problem for our industry and our societies. So with that, I hand over to our speakers tonight. I will talk a little bit later in the closing about things we might do about it. But FIDIC is doing something about it. We encourage you to all do something about it, and hopefully tonight, if you aren't already enthused to combat corruption, you will be by the time tonight's webinar is over. Thank you very much, and welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
Nelson.
Tony. Thanks very much for that opening remark, which is always very useful to put things into perspective. Tony talks about 4 points, the impact of corruption, and he also talked about corporate, and he talks about individual, and then capacity building, which is very important. So from that point of view, it is my pleasure now to really introduce the chair of the Integrity Management Committee, which is Richard Stump. Richard has been an advocate of FIDIC for as long as of my time in FIDIC, from the future leaders to grown up to a very, very mature leader. In all that he does, it goes without saying that he's going to chair this particular meeting and ensure that all panels are given fantastic opportunity to share their view and experience and to make it forward. So Richard, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, everyone. Nelson and Tony, thank you so much for the warm introductions of our topic. This week is a very unusual week in the calendar because we have an opportunity for many of the world's significant religions to be celebrating. For one of our panelists, Hani Sahooly, Ramadan Kareem, and Ramadan Kareem to many of you who have called in today. Many of us will be celebrating the Easter holidays, as well as others will be celebrating Passover, so Pesach Sameach to those who will celebrate that holiday. And there are even others in the world who will be celebrating New Year's, such as Vishu over in Kerala State in India. Why do I bring these things up? It's sometimes very challenging to celebrate and to look towards renewal when we're faced with challenges of corruption, when we're faced with challenges of conflict and war. And even despite some of the things that you'll hear about in the challenges that our speakers have faced in their past, or are certainly facing now, it's very important to focus on a positive outcome and the things that allow us the opportunity to stop, to reflect, and as you heard from Tony and from Nelson, to make sure we're doing the right things, both on an individual level and on a group level. This webinar originally was focusing specifically on demand-side corruption at all levels. However, given the state of war in Eastern Europe and some of the ongoing, almost forgotten conflicts in other parts of the world, the Integrity Management Committee felt it was appropriate to shift the focus to how do we deal with some of these things? How do we deal with the moral and ethical issues of delivering infrastructure with integrity when faced with these challenges? And you're going to hear from 5 important speakers who are going to talk about exactly those things. We'll start off with Roberto de Michele from the Inter-American Development Bank, who's been focusing on rolling out a very important program with transparency and integrity principles. We'll then start to hear from Tim Pence about why people often profess to stand up for integrity, but then may be challenged and somehow fail to do so. And what are the individual and group challenges that face us when faced with an integrity issue? We'll then start to pivot towards the Gulf states. We'll hear from Hani Sahooly, some of the challenges that he's been faced with delivering architectural and engineering services in Yemen, a country which has been racked by civil war for a number of years. And then we'll turn towards Eastern Europe, We'll hear from Cosmin Tobolcea in Romania. He'll talk about the spillover effects of the conflict in Ukraine as he sees them, living less than 150 kilometers from that border. And then finally, we'll finish with Adam Bialachowski, who is running a small consultancy in Poland and is dealing with the impacts of the war in Ukraine on a daily basis as he manages his people and manages his firm. So with that, I'd like to cede the floor to Roberto, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that he has seen in his career and the solutions he's providing. Roberto, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from, I guess, around the globe today. Many thanks to FIDIC for this invitation. Many thanks to the Integrity Management Committee. We've been in touch for a long time now, and I don't think I can add anything else to what Barry and Richard just said about the importance of integrity in infrastructure and development. This is at the core of our mandate at the Inter-American Development Bank. So let me start with two comments on the cost or impact on corruption in infrastructure and investment. A year and a half ago, with a colleague, we took the time to review the results of the audits out of the major natural disasters around the globe in the past 10 years. So that would include tsunamis, earthquakes, kind of the disasters that hit humanity periodically. And we found that no matter the country or the region of the world, it would be the case that 25% of the resources invested to reconstruct or to help people in those situations are lost, cannot be accounted for. And the reasons are many, but one of the reasons is that when you're facing a disaster, when you're facing a challenge, there's a huge tension between doing something quickly and then making it transparent and accountable. The second issue I want to raise is related to my slide. Even when there's no disaster going on in normal times, there are ongoing risks of corruption. And when that happens, particularly in infrastructure, and here I'm trying to show numbers from two countries in our region, just as an example, doesn't mean particularly any mention to those. But when the corruption scandals hit Latin America and other countries of the world out of a large construction firm called Odebrecht, investment in PPPs in Colombia and Peru, as you can see in the chart, they didn't kind of slowly go down. They basically dropped to zero. And why is that? Because another effect of corruption in infrastructure is that this is a very complex contract. So the price is not only paid by the direct parties involved or engaged in the wrongdoing, but then there's a spillover effect to everyone that is not involved in the bribery. So sanctions may occur to companies involved, but then there's a cascade of cancellation of contracts, and that cancellation of contracts hits everyone, whether or not engaged in wrongdoing. So then the question remains, who will finish the works? Who will cover the costs for the unfinished works? And I do not need to mention this to this audience, but as you're aware, every sector in infrastructure is a bit different, and the possibilities of finding a company or a contractor that will step in at the right time and for the right price is not always easy to find, especially in some types of infrastructures. So what do we do about this? What can we do to prevent this from happening again? So at the Inter-American Development Bank, under our Vision 2025, we believe that the rule of law, institutional capacity are at the core of making sure that what we heard at the beginning, people take the use of public resources responsibly. And they do this because this is part of the mandate that we all want in terms of development. So one initial answer that we have developed is, as we just heard from Richard, developing the transparency principles and infrastructure. So this is a global initiative that we started 1.5 years ago, and we're about to finish. And actually, I want to thank FIDIC for their involvement in this initiative. What are we trying to do here? We found two things. One is that the type of problem we're looking at here is in part caused by the absence of clear rules, A, to prevent this from happening, and B, to remedy when this happens in an efficient manner that will protect the investment and especially will protect those who are not responsible for what has happened. And this is extremely relevant in developing nations. So in the paper that is the source for this graph, we found that, for example, in Peru only, the corruption scandal wiped out 10,000 formal jobs. 10,000 formal jobs. This is a consequence that many economies in developing countries cannot afford. And how do you prevent that? You need clear, transparent mechanisms to address this problem. So the transparency principles and infrastructure are meant to develop those kind of mechanisms for countries and for investors. We are very close to completing this project. We have had a global survey that FIDIC was very kind enough to share with their constituents. And we have over 300, 400 global responses. We will publish all of these results in the next couple of months, along with the principles for consultation. So that is something I wanted to mention in the beginning. Then, just as to move ahead and into the next speaker, two more responses that we are trying and implementing in our region. You will receive this after this workshop via the thank you email from the organizers. One of this is called Investment Map. Investment Map is a digital platform where everyone can see everything that is invested by the government. And the platforms are fully interactive. They're based on open contracting partnership principles, so everything is open, every information is available. Anyone can upload an image. Anyone can file a claim whether or not the project or the investment is going where it needs to go. Currently, there are a dozen countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that have adopted these platforms developed by the Inter-American Development Bank with the help of Microsoft. And these platforms are extremely useful because, as we usually say at the bank, we believe that accountability is the combination of access to information with technology. Once you put this together, technology and access to information, then everybody can see what is happening with the use of public resources. So when you receive at the end of this workshop the link to these platforms, there is one in Jamaica, Colombia, Peru, Paraguay, and several countries in Latin America. I invite you to go into these platforms, use the platforms, ask questions, upload images. If you're engaged in infrastructure or you're engaged in some project, do use these platforms. They are as good as the users tend them to make some use of them. And let me finish with one last example of something that was mentioned at the beginning, which is how do we also work on corporate integrity? We are currently helping CONFIEP in Peru. CONFIEP is the chamber of every sector, industrial sector and private sector in Peru, to set up an integrity mechanism with all the elements that will allow the private sector in Peru to regulate their integrity matters. Somebody mentioned early on that this is not just about the demand or supply side of bribery, it's about both. So while we help governments be more transparent and more accountable, we also help the private sector set up its own mechanisms to make sure that everyone is acting according to the highest principles and standards. With this, again, I thank you, the organizers, and Richard, back to you.
Great. Roberto, thank you very much for the explanations and discussion related to what the Inter-American Development Bank is doing on transparency and infrastructure. You mentioned accountability and a system that the bank has developed for the programs it affects within different countries. And I'd like to turn things over to Tim to talk really more about individual accountability and the need to give voice to standing up to issues of integrity challenges and issues of corruption. So with that, Tim, the floor is yours to discuss your points, please.
Thank you, Richard. Today, I want to talk to you about a topic called psychological safety. You might ask the question, why? Because if integrity is the quality of having strong ethical principles and following through on them at all times, then people need to feel safe to give voice to their concerns when they believe that those principles are being violated. But that is easier said than done. So I want to ask you a question. So at work, at any time, have you ever wanted to ask a question or offer up an opinion or an idea, but for some reason you decided to stay quiet instead? If you answered yes to that question, you probably have a pretty good idea about what it's like to feel psychologically unsafe. And if you answered yes to that question, you would be in very good company. In one study that was investigating employee experiences with speaking up, 85% of respondents reported that at least on one occasion, they felt they were unable to bring a concern of great importance to their boss, even though they believed the issue was important. And they found that this fear to speak up and to give voice was present even for minor issues as well. So you can imagine if it's a problem for minor issues, it's going to be a huge issue for speaking up around something like corruption. And this is where psychological safety comes into the equation. One of the world's leading experts around psychological safety is a woman called Amy Edmondson. She works at Harvard, and she's the author of a book called The Fearless Organization. And her definition of psychological safety is it's when you create an environment or culture where people feel they're safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And by that, she means people feel able to speak up and say what they're thinking. And in fact, they feel obliged to speak up and be candid to their peers and call out inappropriate behavior. And that's exactly what is required when you act with integrity. But silence usually wins the day, and there's a biological reason for that. I'm going to introduce you to a concept called SCARF. When I did my neuroscience degree, we did it in a whole semester. I'm going to give it to you in 2 minutes, so you're just going to get a high level. But the reason why I introduced this is because our brains are hypersensitive about survival. As a result, over sort of millennia, our brain evolved circuitry to evaluate 5 core needs and that have an impact on survival. And if these needs are not being met, it creates a threat response, and that's the fight or flight response. And these are at play for every aspect in our lives, big things, small things. But I'm going to pose some questions to you that demonstrate specifically how they're at play for corruption. So here's the first one that we're wired for. Humans are wired for status. We're forever sort of measuring to say, how is my status? How's my worth? Am I being valued? If we're not being valued, that activates the threat system. If we feel like we are being valued, then we feel safe. So when people are making the choice whether or not they give voice to what concerns they have about corruption, they're thinking about, is my status going to be impaired if I speak up? And this is why sometimes they may sort of be silent rather than giving voice. The second thing that we're wired for is certainty. Like the human beings have a prediction machine, and it has been battered over the last 2 years with the pandemic because it's been uncertainty. And the brain hates that. It puts us into a threat state. So one of the questions that people will be asking themselves when they decide whether or not to speak up or be silent is, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my career if I speak up? If they feel like they don't have a clear answer to that, then they're going to err on the side of silence rather than speaking up. So what sort of do we put in place so that people know that they're going to be protected and safe when they speak up? The third thing that humans are wired for is autonomy. So humans are always monitoring to say, what control do I have over events in my situation? Do I manage my own destiny. So that's one of the things they're going to be thinking about as well. If I speak up, if I act with courage, will I have control about how this will play out for me? If they feel yes, they're probably going to feel more confident speaking up. If they feel like they're going to lose all control, they may choose silence. The fourth thing that humans are wired for is called relatedness, and that's about how we feel safe with other. That's our sense of belonging. It's like whether or not we feel like we have a tribe. So again, that's just primal human wiring. Sort of people will be thinking like, if I speak up, if I act with courage, is that going to impact my relationship with my tribes? And if they feel like it may have a negative impact, they may choose silence. And finally, the fifth one is fairness. And so again, we've got circuitry that's saying, will I be treated fairly? And again, sort of if people are wondering, if I act with courage, if I speak up, will I be treated fairly? If there's doubt there about that they might, then they might choose silence. So you can see why those 5 human factors that all humans have make it harder for us to give voice to concerns and make it easier for silence to win the day. But there are things that leaders can do to create psychologically safe workspaces so that voice wins out over silence and people can act with integrity. And Amy Edmondson identifies 3 key phases that leaders have to put into place. And the first one is you need to set the stage. So you need to frame the work for people, and you have to be sort of upfront and say, these are the expectations. This is the level of uncertainty we're going to face. This is the risk of failure. This is the level of interdependence for our success. We're going to rely on different groups. And the higher those factors, the more the need you're going to have to put in place mechanics for giving forth to that voice. The other thing that she says is key is you have to tap into the purpose motive, because if people have a clear sense of why they're doing things, sort of what's at stake, why does it matter, who does it matter for, then they are more likely to act in ways that they will speak up for those other folks. So the second thing she says you need to do is, once you've sort of set the frame, is you then need to invite participation. And the things that help with inviting participation is for senior leaders to make themselves vulnerable and to say, hey, I made a mistake, or hey, I have fears, or hey, I have a skill gap, or hey, I failed. Because when they see senior leaders do that, they feel like it's okay for them to do that. She said you also have to invest in just skill building so that people get good at doing active listening. They get good at asking questions. They get good at making people feel heard. And that you need to set up structures and processes and guidelines so that people can find their voice. And then finally, she said you need to respond productively when people do have the courage to give voice. And you need to thank them when they do and not criticize the way they went about actually doing it. And she says it's about destigmatizing failure and saying, we're going to fail. That's the norm. And say, let's have a learning culture and let's fail forward and learn from that. And then finally, she said it's absolutely imperative that if someone gives voice, that you sanction clear violations. Because if someone acts with courage, they take a risk, they speak up, and nothing happens, she says they'll never speak up again. So that's psychological safety in a nutshell. Thank you.
Tim, thank you very much for setting the table with regards to psychological safety and some of the very important issues that it touches upon with regard to uncertainty, with regard to the SCARF principles, and just setting up a culture and an environment that allows people to speak up with integrity and to fight corruption. We're going to turn to situations that are much more challenging, and we're going to hear from some speakers now who have dealt with those issues and continue to deal with them on a daily basis. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Hani Sahooly, who has had a budding consultancy that began in Yemen. I worked with him in Yemen before the civil war began. And Hani, I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about what it's like to deliver infrastructure solutions in the challenging environment that you face in your home country. Hani, your microphone is muted. We can't hear you. So while Hani is getting his audio back online, just a couple of thoughts related to some of the things that that Tim did mention. It's certainly a challenge to set up a great environment. Hani, are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Perfect. The floor is yours, Hani.
Yeah. My name is Hani Sahooly. I'm an architect, graduated in 1998 and established my firm in Yemen. So we have 24 years of experience doing business, consulting business in Yemen. We worked before war, during the war, and recently we are doing a couple of projects in Yemen and in the Middle East and Africa as well. So my first point is discussing working conditions during the civil war in Yemen. Before the war, we, as everybody knows, in the third world country, we suffered a lot of the corruption and dishonor. Okay, but you know, during the war, to be honest, this increased dramatically. So because the procurement system, the controlling, the auditing system collapsed, totally collapsed. So as everybody knows, there are typical like ways of corruption everywhere in the world. Maybe in Yemen, during the war, people developed, you know, very smarter ways, okay, to for the corruption, to be honest. We are facing this on a daily basis because, as I said, we still doing works in Yemen. So the most, you know, popular corrupted, you know, way is to be blackmailed by the people you are delivering the project to them. And I have very maybe very strange, you know, story about the project that we already signed before the war. And during the war, I mean, we asked for force majeure, okay, for a couple of projects that we cannot deliver because we cannot bring, you know, the sources to the project. But, you know, the client, unfortunately, and because of the corruption as well, because he wanted his people to do the project instead of us as a consultant, okay, and he enforced the consultant to hire, you know, people from you know, the beneficiary side, says the governmental side, okay, to do the business instead of the consultant, and the consultant will fund this project in advance. It was very strange, and once we refused that, they said they will terminate the project and liquidate, you know, all the bonds that we have in this project. So this is very strange, you know, situation that we faced. We are faced with till now, okay, different type of projects. It was a big project. You know, we spent, you know, long time doing the tendering procedure to win them, and easily they decided to either to go and do the business instead of us, okay, and we have to pay them and wait for our dues, or they will terminate and liquidate, you know, this, you know, our bonds in these projects. So we face this in many, you know, level projects, and we are trying to solve this issue with them. So I could, you know, this is, you know, like gives us a new dimension to the term of force majeure. I would call it forced majeure. We have been forced, okay, to do things during the war, which is, to be honest, you know, highly level of corruption. This is the first case that I wanted to talk about, the blackmailing. The second case is when we work with any governmental bodies, okay, we are doing a big project for international funding agency in Yemen. Definitely, we need source of information. We need to discuss with the beneficiaries about, about the project. So again, the counterparts, they refuse to give the consultant any information unless they work with us, okay? So this is like, we faced this before the war, but now it's really, like being, very tough, okay, for us. And in some project, we decided to not go and terminate the project because of this, type of cases. So they refused to give us, the previous studies of the projects and to work with us. They attending the meetings with the international funding agencies in Yemen or outside of Yemen, and they claimed that the consultant cannot do the job because they refused to give us without telling that, clearly to everybody. Okay, so I know that everyone faced, the different way, and I know that the corruption is developed, smartly, everywhere in the world. But I'm just giving you some cases from what we are facing on a daily basis in Yemen. So it's the working condition during the civil work in Yemen is very, very bad, okay? So I wanted to add one good example, okay, of managing a project that we are doing recently with the International Funding Agency as well, is to announce for the project internationally, signing the contract with the consultant directly with the International Funding Agency without, involving any, local authorities or beneficiaries from ground, because those people are the corrupted people, to be honest, okay? Not all of them, but most of them. So we are now doing a project which I can call the best, way to do it during, the war. We signed the contract directly with them. They are monitoring the contractual and the technical, aspects of the project on a weekly progress meeting. They hire people from Yemen. They work with them based on their conditions. They have a really good control, and the consultant has the rule and the authority to deal with the beneficiaries with the coordination of the local counterpart of this international organization. So now we are doing, we completed about 60% of this project. And this is the best, scenario that we are doing now in Yemen. And we did it with another, international funding agency because they had long experience doing this in Yemen, and they know, the circumstances. So they decided to do it in a totally different way rather than the normal way, which is, involving the local partner and the government, in approving, reviewing, every single stage of the project, which we suffered a lot every time we need any approval or need any information from those guys. So I can call it the best way of doing the consulting works in Yemen. I think maybe this example exists in elsewhere, but I'm talking about what I'm doing in Yemen with my firm. I wanted just to give you a background about us, quick one. HS Group is one of the biggest, consulting firm, we completed around 300 projects, starting from the built environment, urban planning, infrastructure, all type of projects. So we dealt with many clients and many international organizations before the war and during the war. One more thing I wanted to add is the main international funding agencies, they stopped funding projects in Yemen, and because those entities has a very strong procurement system, can monitor, and be close, enough to monitor the integrity and to say, avoid or decrease, the level of corruption in Yemen. Unfortunately, they stopped, funding projects, and now we have NGOs, most of them a local fund, plus some international organization that I already explained our experience with them. Hopefully, the situation will be, good in the near coming future. This is what I wanted to participate today, and I'm open later on for any questions. Thank you so much for everybody.
Great. Hani, thank you very much for that very clear and present example of the challenges that you've faced in Yemen as it relates to challenges with your very clients, and even an example of an international funding agency who has stepped up and managed to procure and deliver services with your assistance in a manner of integrity. So it's certainly one example of a potential outcome that we would want to avoid. And with that in mind, let's turn the focus towards Eastern Europe for a few minutes. And I'd like to introduce Cosmin Tobolcea to everyone, the managing director of Protoby. And Cosmin will give us his thoughts on working in times of emergency and conflict as they relate to Romania and Eastern Europe, as we're coming out of a pandemic and moving into another emergency situation. So Cosmin, the floor is now yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. Good day, afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be a participant here today at this very interesting webinar. My name is Cosmin Tobolcea. I'm the general manager of the medium-sized consulting company, Protoby, which is a consulting company in environmental projects, especially for water and wastewater projects. As for FIDIC, I can proudly say that I'm for almost 10 years a member of this beautiful family, the FIDIC family, starting with being part of the Young Professionals Committee, then being the vice chair of the Future Leaders Committee, and finally being the chair of the Future Leaders Committee, and a position that now it's occupied by Adam and the next speaker. As Richard was saying in the beginning, I will start with a little bit of geographical aspect. So I'm living in Iași. Iași is a city, the second city after Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania. And Iași is situated in the northeast part of Romania. From Iași to the border of Ukraine, we have around 120 kilometers. And in the east part with the Republic of Moldova, we have around 40 to 60 kilometers. So 2 hours drive to Ukraine and 1 hour drive to Republic of Moldova. 45 days ago, in one Thursday morning, I woke up and my WhatsApp was full with notifications. I had no idea what is happening. I turned on the TV, and then I saw the horrible images that were happening in Ukraine, very, very close to us. And the next 5 days were quite hectic for us, because also being so close, also having all this information from social media, all the rumors and everything, We didn't know how to act here in Romania. We knew that we are part of the European Union, we are part of NATO and everything, but everything was in a blur in the beginning. I remember the images in the border that I told you, 2 hours from my city. The images with the crying women, with the small babies, with the children passing through. And it's images that I saw it with my eyes. It's images that I never thought that in our days in Europe, I am going to see this kind of images that my grandparents were telling me from the Second World War. But in the meantime, the Romanian people organized in the beginning much more better than the authorities. And the solidarity and what happened in the borders with helping the refugees with food, diapers, hygiene products, blankets, car accommodations was absolutely incredible. And for me as a Romanian is a very big reason to be very proud of this organization. And also the consulting engineers, the engineers did a very good job in organizing different help for the refugees from Ukraine. Now, after 45 days, it's getting a little bit more quiet here. So maybe let's hope that the things are going to change for better and it's going to normal and this whole thing is going to stop. But we have to think what is going to happen us as consultants in infrastructure. What is going to happen in Ukraine after all of this is going to happen and to end? How we are going to help the Ukraine to rebuild in this difficult state of emergency? In Romania, in the last days, nothing happened regarding special procurement rules. So everything is happening quite normal. And maybe Adam can confirm or inform this after I finish my speech. But things are going normally here. But still with a psychological pressure, let's say, with what is happening very, very close to us. So regarding our government, the Romanian government, no special procurement rules were provided. But when having the prep talk with our fellow speakers a few days ago, we discussed, and I remember that 2 years ago, in March 2020, we had the problem with the pandemics and COVID and state of emergency and going for tenders and special tenders and very fast tenders and what to do for them and how we are going to do it as fast as possible. But 2 years later, I don't know if the special procurement rules that we had in that period were the right ones for integrity and transparency. Because for us, as part of the European Union, part of the European funds, we are in direct connection to the European Union directives for public procurement. So our Ministry for European Funds is in direct connection with the European Commission. Everything is very well supervised and taking care of if something, let's say, not very transparent is going to happen. It's clear that there are going to be corrections and sanctions for the companies and of course for the state and for the European funds value. But if we are looking back at the lessons that maybe let's hope that we learn from COVID, maybe we need some special procurements type law for infrastructure building, because in times of war and after the war, I think the very three important principles of non-discrimination, of equal treatment and of transparency have to be very, very well applied in this situation. And after the war, it is clear that in the first years of this reconstruction for a country, it's a period of hope and excitement. So everybody is trying to do it as fast as possible and maybe as good as possible. But is this complied to what is public procurement? Is this complied to what is the regulations for this all over the world? And from my experience, because our company is working in 4 Eastern European countries, the integrity of the public procurement system is, and this is my opinion, is very well related to the quality of the people involved, from the agents from the public sector until the economical operators from the private sector. So probably after the war is going to finish, there are going to be development programs and very, very important donors, foreign donors, with funds for rebuilding the country. But sometimes, and this is what I saw in Yugoslavia, also a neighborhood of the country, international aid can have the unintended effect of harming the skills of the local people. Because sometimes when this is happening, and I know that I read an article, in Yugoslavia, very qualified engineers, after the war finished, were working like drivers. So maybe this is going to be like a thing that we should think as FIDIC, as consulting engineers, helping the consulting engineering all over the world, how the local people have to be much more involved after a war is finished. And for refugees in Romania, so around 300,000 enter Romania, around 200,000 exit Romania to other European countries. But we still have around 100,000 people, refugees in Romania. Private sector is starting in hiring them from different jobs. I can tell you that in my company, we just put recently, last week, an advertisement for a job for consulting engineering and trying to find Ukrainian engineers which are in Romania, which left Ukraine, and to help them to try to rebuild their life. As integrity in reconstruction is a shared responsibility. I think that all stakeholders can make very positive interventions in the process of the recovery, and foreign donors have to lead by example. Thank you very much to the organizers, and back to you, Richard.
Great. Cosmin, thank you very much for starting to put a face on the people who are going to be responsible for delivering with integrity. You mentioned the quality of the people as being very, very important to the success of procurement. And I'd like to continue with that theme of looking at how we can come out of the challenge that is being not only faced by the people of Ukraine, but also by the consultants who are working in Ukraine, by turning things over to our last speaker, Adam Bialachowski, the CEO of Vintage Consulting in Poland. So Adam, the floor is yours for your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Richard. Richard, I'm talking to you from a hotel room, and I was just informed there might be a fire drill. So I hope that doesn't happen, but if it happens, I apologize for that. Most of the FIDIC family knows me as the chair of the FIDIC Future Leaders. However, today I'll be speaking to you as the CEO of a group of engineering companies called BIACT and Quantum Vintage. We do engineering supervision and contract administration works and engage over 150 professionals in Poland, and we're about to engage almost the same in the Ukraine. So being part of this webinar is very timely for me, and speaking on integrity, and as a Harvard graduate, the Latin word veritas, which is truth, means a lot, and is, I think, a timely thing to talk about. Ukraine started for me before 2012, where they hosted the European Cup together with Poland. And my first visit to the Ukraine was before 2012. It was a different time then, where we were all betting on Ukraine joining the European Union and NATO. And that's why me and my brothers decided to start developing our business in the Ukraine. And it was a very interesting time to start expanding our business there, especially in the last 3 years with COVID and now this war. I haven't been there for almost 3 years now. And integrity and trust have always been a key element, especially when it comes to clients and our partners there. And for this, I would like to thank my friends, the Interstate Consultants Engineering Guild, and send them my warmest regards. And as one of the largest engineering consultancies now in the Ukraine, especially when it comes to road projects, we have 9 construction sites ongoing, providing engineering consulting and in the form of construction supervision. 6 of them were funded by the Polish government as loans, and 3 of them were funded internally, and we had 1 World Bank project. So 2 weeks before the war, we signed a 10th project, which was to build a bridge between Ukraine and Moldova. And I was just in the process of engaging with talks with our employees about, when to send them to the Ukraine and how to start it with the whole military buildup escalation. So it was also an interesting experience then, but none of us were betting on the war actually happening, and not us, not the Ukrainians, not our partners, nobody. We all thought, to be honest with you, it was a media, let's say, storm that was being used for political purposes, but we did not think that it would actually happen. So as you can imagine, the situation that was put on our employees and sub-consultants, it's a very terrible situation. And we're offering, as a company and individuals in my home, shelter to all the families of the people who work. Men aged 18 to 65 have to remain in the Ukraine. Sorry about that. They just ended the exercise.
Oh, Adam.
Sorry for that. We are sending currently jackets and vests that will be crossing the border today, and something that I never thought I would be helping coordinate.
While we're waiting for Adam to be able to continue his presentation after the drill ends.
The drill is over, so
sorry about that. Okay, not a problem, Adam. Please continue.
So I never thought that as a CEO of an engineering consulting business, I would be coordinating the supply of jackets and military vests to my partners and employees that are still in the Ukraine. And procurement considerations, I also want to be honest and truthful with you. Ukraine is culturally very close to Poland, but still a bit different. Our first project the tender for our first project was won in June 2017. And we did not receive a signed contract till the beginning of 2019, and the construction started in 2020. So for Western standards of engaging in consulting services, this is a bit slower than people are used to in the West. However, the changes that happened since then to the procurement system have leaned Ukraine to the West, very much so. And if you are interested in that, I would highly recommend a Washington Post article, and it was written by Andrew Radin, and it talks about how the update of the Ukrainian procurement law in 2020 in the Washington Post, this article was, impacted their ability to defend themselves by being able to procure services and military equipment faster. So it's a very interesting, the transparency and the expedition of this process helped them actually prepare for this war very well. And it was the same for even our services. What in 2017 took 3 years, in 2020, 2019 was already back to normal, I would say, to Western standards. My passports, I had 2 passports before the changes and before COVID. I had to change 2 passports because that's how much I had to travel to the Ukraine to try to develop my business. Since the last 3 years, I haven't been there. And, the tenders were done electronically. They had a transparent system of tendering where the requirements were published online for everybody to see. It was really going in the right direction. So as a case study that Richard knows about when we were preparing for this webinar, there is a contract that I have, all my contracts are suspended. Force majeure is in place. I have 1 outstanding invoice for a road reconstruction projects from Lviv towards the border in Poland. And part of this road reconstruction, there is a bridge that's being constructed, and the local road agency, despite our contract being suspended, has asked me to help via our local personnel to supervise the securing of this bridge for possible evacuation of Lviv. So it's a very interesting request if you think about it from an ethical point of view, from a business point of view, because from an ethical point of view, one is, do I ask my local employees to go on site? Do I ask a Polish project manager to go to Ukraine right now? Do I carry out services despite my contract being suspended? do I carry out services despite my last invoice not being paid? Very interesting, let's say, dilemmas for a CEO of a business. What we've decided to do is that we will go ahead and try to coordinate our local experts to be on site, the local technical site inspectors, together with the contractor. And this is a process that's ongoing. And the reason for this is twofold. One is there's a very strong brotherhood between Poland and Ukraine, and it has been for a long time. So we've accepted around 2.5 million refugees to our homes and houses. So from a perspective of having a solidarity with them, we think it's the right thing to do. From a perspective of a business, we also think it's maybe a bit risky when it comes to cash flow, but still the right thing to do, because if ever Ukraine, which we think will happen, the situation normalizes and there is a prospect for building and rebuilding of Ukraine, gestures like this don't go forgotten in Eastern Europe, I would say, like this. So in our culture, sometimes money is not the #1 decision, but loyalty and friendship and trust is something that gets, let's say, put in our minds. So that's the decision we decided to do. And yeah, so I also was asked to talk about special procurement rules during an emergency. Our company has decided right now not to participate in any of the special procurements that are ongoing when it comes to local defense construction. So we are not specialized in military. We have some military contracts that we've done, but we are not specialized in military engineering consulting. So we prefer to see what happens and not participate in the current new emergency tenders that are taking place. There are some changes to the rules that are being implemented that are driving the expediency of the projects and selections of contractors and consultants and material supplies from Poland, for example. They are soon to add construction materials to a list of items that you can pay for to get the money out of Ukraine. So you can wire transfer money for certain materials and certain services, but not for others. Right now it's been frozen for everything, so they are changing this. So, but we are not participating in it. I don't know the details of it that much. The impacts of the war in Poland are soaring prices of materials. 25% of our construction industry took all types of metals from the Ukraine or from Belarus or Russia. So steel, aluminium, all of this was imported from the East, and the price of steel went, I think, 150% in a month and a half. Our gas went from, let's say, €1 a liter to 250 a liter. So asphalt obviously went up because of the macro scale of increase of prices. So it's an interesting time for contractors. It's not a too bad time for consultants, because consultants are being hired to do price variation claims. So I can't complain about the claim business, so to speak, in our services, but it's not a healthy environment right now. And labor shortages. 30% of the Ukrainian men who were in Poland decided to go back. So despite us receiving 2.5 million of women and children, out of the estimated 500,000 Ukrainian physical workers who work on our construction sites, 30% of them left. So it's also had an impact on the physical labor available in Poland and the price of this labor. So when it comes to challenges and integrity right now, and ethics and trust and money, it's a very interesting time in Poland to run a business. And luckily, it's only interesting, it's not unsafe compared to my colleagues in the Ukraine. But cash flow versus, ethical versus business development, it has always been a balancing act. And I think it's even more so right now. And it has implications for providing consulting engineering services daily. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you to FIDIC, Nelson, and everybody in the Secretariat. Richard, thank you for organizing this webinar. And I'm open to any questions.
Great. Adam, thank you very much for telling the story of the situation that you and your staff are experiencing on the ground as you continue to deal with the challenges, not just on your projects in Ukraine, but even the impacts as they relate to your delivery of services in Poland. So what I'd like to do now is open up the floor to some questions, and we've been receiving some in the chat, and we've got some really excellent questions that I'd like to pose, not just to some of the members of our committee, but also to the leadership of FIDIC. One of the questions that I see in the chat relates to the challenges that many people face that have good intentions going into a conflict zone and helping to reconstruct. And then basically this questioner is asking, what would be FIDIC's role in trying to assist and facilitate that process in terms of how could FIDIC or other organizations work with governments to develop plans and procedures for ethical procurement in the time of crisis? So I'd like to ask Tony and Nelson to see if they have any observations on this thought before I take some of the other comments and distribute them across our excellent panel of speakers.
It's Tony here. I'll start if I could. The problem for you, Richard, is that the board is likely to hand that question straight back to the Integrity Management Committee. I think, there's no doubt more work needs to be done on integrity management in procurement. There's also no doubt that every other aspect of project investment right through to delivery and maintenance, the same applies. So it is a large task. FIDIC has limited resources, but I think there is still room for us to continue to develop on the basis of what we've already done, to continue to develop both training materials, the systems, if you like, information and procurement strategies and approaches which can eliminate corruption. I think from my point of view, I worked in Asia and Africa for many years and some small amount of experience in the Middle East. But from my experience, the greatest training we can give people is actual case studies. And to me, there's a lot of work that FIDIC could do to collect those case studies and make them available and really start posing questions to people as to how they would behave in the face of those difficult questions. Because no matter how good our systems are, this does come down to personal conduct and how one handles the situation that one faces. There is little doubt that corruption is becoming much more sophisticated and difficult and entrenched in many areas. So we need a systems approach, but we also need the personal leadership, courage and capacity building to make sure it's effective.
Thanks very much, Tony. Perhaps, Richard, maybe I can just sort of build on that. I think Tony is right to say the natural reaction for us is to look into our body of knowledge and to seek advice as to how best to move forward. But if we just go back a little bit into the last 2 years, which has been an exemplar of unplanned situation, which is a global issue. In the case of COVID, what we did, just to follow on what Tony talked about, is we went to our contract committee. We asked them, and we said, there's a lot of issue, force majeure, what's the interpretation, how do you deal with this? And very quickly, our sort of contract committee came up with a number of memorandum, which helped a lot of people to do the interpretation and to overcome a lot of challenges. So in the same manner, just prior to this webinar coming up, we were discussing the same issue because we've seen quite a lot of people are saying, what is the state of play for FIDIC? And my natural reaction was there are two group of people that we should be approaching: our contract committee to look at what is happening to contract and how do we move contract. Because I do pick up the point that Adam talks about, the challenges, the ethics, the trust, and the cash flow management. These are very, very critical. And the second point really is coming back to the IMC, which is your group, and say, look, how do we find a blended solution? Understanding that, the challenges that are, the practitioners are having are real. The question is, at the moment, there is still war going on. Whilst we don't want to go into the detail, but So a lot of projects are being frustrated, and those projects at a point in time need to pick up. On the other hand, there's the humanitarian activity, which FIDIC is pursuing through Red Cross and Red Eye to make sure at least people are doing what they can. But ultimately, I think the best we can do really is to try and do a scenario planning and see how those scenario issues can actually come to play. Interestingly, us talking to the banks, because we do have 8 banks who are using FIDIC contracts, whether it's the World Bank, Inter-American Development, all of them are saying their focus now is not the traditional procurement, it's about how they can respond to the disaster. Just like everything was moving to humanitarian on the issue of COVID, the same thing is happening. Where is the shift of energy is going to be? So the answer to your question, we will be coming to the IMC and we will be going to the contract committee to say, how do we find a blended solution? One is looking at the contractual relation and interpretation of the contract of project, because I do listen to what Adam was saying. What do you do? Do you say you're not going to participate? Do you feel emotional? And do you feel, compelled? So there's all sorts of things going through. And what we'll be doing over the coming weeks is to come up with some memorandum, which I hope that the IMC will help us to shape in collaboration with the contract committee, so that industry can find a way to deal with here and now, but also to deal with the situation post-conflict. Thank you.
Great. Tony, Nelson, thank you very much. One of the things that has come up over the course of this discussion, and based on your comments related to relying on bodies of knowledge and relying on alternative ways of delivery, leads me to pose a question to Roberto, which is related to some of the things I'm seeing in the chat as it relates to the notion of, again, procurement. And Roberto, what you've talked about in the IADB is really focused on IFI and public procurement, but you mentioned in your presentation how private procurement and private funding dried up and dropped off after the scandal in South America. What would you see as a potential solution to support private side investment in a country where reconstruction is needed after a war ceases, say, for example, in Yemen or Ukraine or another country where conflict may occur?
Thank you. Great question. And actually, I'm not sure this is true for the rest of the world, but at least in Latin America and the Caribbean, 90% of the financing for infrastructure does not come from the MDBs, from the multilateral, it comes from the private sector. So unless you build the conditions for trust, that money is not coming in. Or worse, the type of money that is coming in is the kind of resources you don't want to have. So in order to build trust, I think some of the examples that were given in this presentations come to the point. One silent revolution that is happening, and probably you've noticed this, is the whole idea of creating beneficial ownership registries. This is a very substantial reform, not just for fiscal matters, but to understand who we're all doing business with. Beneficial ownership registries allow you to know who is the final owner of a given firm, and therefore allows you to see whether or not you're having fair competition, or a company, a bidder or a supplier is representing self-interest of someone in government. Another reform, a silent reform that is happening, and maybe, awkwardly, we have to thank the pandemic for this. In our region, at least, and probably this is also true globally, that there was a leapfrog forward in the use of digital technologies for procurement and for following, as we say, follow the money. Many of these solutions that are happening nowadays are run automatically. So the platforms that I was mentioning, where you can see all the procurement, you don't have an individual behind the platform loading the data, because that creates a lot. Most of these new generation platforms run themselves automatically, and they allow for something which is critical to prevent fraud and corruption in procurement, which they basically wipe out asymmetric information. Everyone can see everything as it is happening, and anyone can go in any way with an image, a video, a claim, any kind of questions, and ask what is happening in this specific procurement. So I think we are better prepared now to face the huge challenges that the combination of COVID, but also the combination of conflict are bringing to our scene. And in that sense, I believe something that FIDIC is doing, which is extremely important, is creating the active role for the private sector to bring this forward. It is critical that the private sector, as Anthony was saying at the beginning, as Sonny was saying at the beginning, if you raise this issue, then change will come. It is very important that everyone steps up to the plate. Thank you.
Great. Roberto, thank you very much for those observations. And I want to pivot to a comment that Cosmin made related to the quality of people acting to further the outcomes of reconstruction and successful reconstruction. So basically, Cosmin, if I heard you correctly, you talked about the people in reconstruction are going to be able to affect it if they're well trained and if they're high quality and if they're high integrity. So what I'm going to do now is this is going to be a two-part question. So first I'm going to go to Tim, and then Cosmin, we're going to come back to you. So Tim, you laid out a very nice way forward for how people can speak up when they're in a position of safety. And as we've heard throughout this presentation, that can be highly challenged when you're dealing with a civil war or a conflict or a refugee crisis or a pandemic. So in order to achieve the outcome that Cosmin mentioned about quality of people, what would you feel is the most important thing that we could do to have a well-trained procurement team and execution team? And then Cosmin, I'd like you to respond to Tim in terms of how effective you feel that might be as a potential outcome related to the challenge you laid out in your presentation.
Okay. Well, the biggest thing I'm going to come away from this is I'm never going to whinge about the work conditions I have to work with employees with ever again, because I'm just humbled by the conditions you guys have to operate under. That being said, I think one of the things that I've taken from the discussions thus far that I've really liked, and I think that links back to Edmondson's research, is the case study examples, the scenario planning examples. Those are brilliant because those are examples of inviting participation. And it also, from a neuroscience perspective, the more and more you can train people to think about sort of how will I behave when I'm actually in this situation, the more that you do that, the more that you strengthen those neural pathways so that they fire when they need to fire. So I think that's brilliant. The other thing that I really liked about what I've heard thus far is like the transparency element as well, because that speaks to certainty. And remember, if people can get a view, like a dashboard of everything that's going on, that's going to quiet the threat system in the brain. And it's sort of what I didn't talk about in the presentation, because we only 8 minutes, is human beings are wired with a negativity bias. So in the absence of information, we finish the story with a negative outcome rather than a positive one. So that's why sort of if you've got the transparency, then you can sort of, calm that limbic system. Because the downside of an active limbic system is that it impairs your prefrontal cortex. And that's the thing that actually makes you smart, because that's the thing that does critical thinking, goal pursuit behavior, creativity, emotional regulation. So I'll stop there.
Great. Tim, thank you. And Cosmin, based on what Tim has laid out in his reaction, where do you see that being effective as helping to encourage the consultancy environment in Romania as a response to the ongoing conflicts and spillover into your country?
Well, what is happening and what the team was saying, this word transparency, I think it's a very, very important word. And I think we have underlined it. And to help, when I was saying about the quality of the people, and I was referring to the quality from the public sector, of the people from the public sector, or from the economical operators, from the private sector. it's important. Training, I think, is very important. Education is very important. Mentality is very important. And I think when putting all together in the same basket, let's say, it's something which I'm always speaking also inside my company or outside and to my friends. It's important about emotional intelligence, how you can deal with it, and how can you in case when somebody is offering you something, because nevertheless this is a situation worldwide. How do you react to this? But if you do not have the proper way of reacting, if you do not have the training, if you do not have the skill how to say no, how can you do this? And I think that for its public procurement, I think it's very important the training, more and more training, and training where everybody has to understand what are the rules and what are the deadlines, let's say. What are the final lines, and not to cross that red line.
Great. Cosmin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
I realize we could probably have a very long conversation and go for a very, very long time on this topic. And I really appreciate all of the excellent thoughts from Roberto, Tim, Hani, Cosmin, and Adam. So what I'd like to do now is turn things back over to Tony. We've heard a lot of great information, a lot of real examples. Allow you as our president to summarize your thoughts, and we'll then give everybody an opportunity to walk away having learned something, and we'll move on with the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. So, Mr. President, the floor is yours again.
Thank you very, very much. I certainly appreciate everything I've heard here today, and as has already been said, we can have nothing but respect for our colleagues in Eastern Europe who are dealing with this massive challenge that's in front of them on a day-to-day basis. I think I would like to start by saying that delivering a sustainable world to our future generations requires engineers to lead with integrity in all aspects of government, business, and our projects. I think I then, having listened to what I have, say that in integrity in the context of leadership includes all aspects, if you like, of honour, honesty, of ethics, of probity, decency, truthfulness, empathy, and trust, among many other traits, no doubt, but they're the ones I have jotted down. And I think it's really quite critical that we, to Tim's point, put our people in a position where they can lead with integrity. And I guess I would say integrity, firstly, is everybody's responsibility. And we need to be able to make the personal decisions to behave and to lead with integrity. We need to make organisational policy and organisational decisions to reject corruption and to act with integrity. And we may, probably need to make decisions to stop dealing with people who are corrupt. But to enable all that to happen, I am down the track of really this notion that situational scenario training, if I can call it that, forgive the term, will build and enable us to build the situational awareness and the resilience to behave with integrity. And to me, those are the things I take away from tonight. I think there's a lot to be done. There are many of us, and I am one, who could share some 20 to 30 scenarios that I've personally been involved in my career where, and in, I think, all but one, we've walked away. I've walked away. And in, I think, over half of them, I've reported them. So I'd love to share that with people at some point in an appropriate environment, in a training circumstance. But to me, that's part of the skill here, is for us to be able to build that awareness and resilience in our people. There's a lot of sophistication we need to overcome. Registers of beneficial owners is one that I've heard, which I support. The other one, which FIDIC has already adopted, is a declaration of interests made by every person in a significant position in the organisation, and that declaration of interests enables us to really focus in on people who should not be part of certain decisions or who might be asked to stand aside when there's particular debates or discussions going on where they have a particular interest. So I think there are a number of strategies we can adopt as well, and we need to continue to work on this, because as I said at the start, it is FIDIC's objective to combat corruption and to fight it. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the Secretariat for organising tonight and the support they've given all of the speakers, including myself. Thank you very much. And back to you. Thank you. Back to you, Nelson, I think.
I hope you can hear me here. Thank you very much, Mr. President Tony, for staying late in Australia to keep us, in line and shape. Many thank you I've heard from Tony, so I'm not going to spend too much time going through individual, but I think it goes without saying that I have to say to Richard for your leadership and your direction and the way you eloquently deliver this particular webinar, which is actually quite timely. I want to say massive thank you to you. As Tony said, the job is not done yet because we'll be coming to IMC. There's a lot of takeaway from here as to what we can do to make our position quite clear. Obviously, our 5 speaker, Roberto, team, Hani and Adam and Cosmin, thank you very much for your time. It's absolutely appreciated. Your experience and what you've shared with us is well recognized, and we appreciate that. I could go through a lot of issues, but I think I'll pick 1 or 2 points. For me, I always like to do. I like the issue about register of beneficial ownership. So thank you very much. That's a new language for me. And I think we'll pick that up, which is very good. I also take up quite a lot of things that you talk about human factor in status, in certainty, an issue about, relativity and fairness. I think those ones are very, very valuable. Cosmin, you talk about training, and actually the issue of emotional intelligence, a subject that I play with all the time, is very relevant to me, and I think to the industry. And also, Adam, you raised the issue about ethics. You talk about the balancing the balance sheet and cash flow and having to do the right thing. I think you guys are doing the right thing, and it's such an enviable position. So thank you very much, Cosmin, for sharing that experience. I also pick up the word about scenario and looking at how do we use that sensibly. And I'm sure Tony is going to give me some, activity along that line and how do we play that. And I will be coming back to the IMC and also contract committee. But there's a lot been talked about in terms of ethics, empathy, and trust. Those are big words and they are very relevant. And Tony is absolutely right. Everything within FIDIC now will start with the issue about declaring potential conflict of interest and declaration on annual, at board level, at committee level, including the staff. This is absolutely issue because we have to practice what we preach. And this is very good. So my closing comment, has been fantastic to listen to you all. And thank you very much for contribution. Again, it goes without saying, I need to make it plug. We are doing our contract users conference at the regional one to do with Africa, to do with Latin America and Asia. The dates are very much on the screen. Next slide, please. Then you start to think about September. We are going to have a real life, in-person conference. A lot of these issues we discuss here, we'll be picking them up again. So again, for your record, have a look of the date and have the date in your diary. And it goes without saying, next slide, just be aware with the conference are the future, activity, Future Leaders Award, be in there. I'm sure that, Adam and Cosmin will be helping us to make sure that at least we get the young one in there. Project Award and also the MA Award. These are things that's coming up. So please bear that in mind. And without further saying, I'm just going to say thank you to everybody, particularly to the FIDIC staff behind the scene who makes us look so pretty and presentable. Thank you very much. You know who you are, Lisa, Chanel, Andy, and the rest of the team. Thank you very much for all that you're doing. And Tony, I hope you can have a glass of wine before you finish. On that note, wherever you are, as usual, we want to finish on time and we go 2 minutes before we go. There is no delay, there's no disruption, and we are going to finish on time. So wherever you are, please keep safe and take care. God bless you. Bye.